I was trying to get working on paper, old school. So it was 11:11 for a whole minute, but I didn't notice it because I wasn't paying attention. And 11:11 isn't like my special magical time. I'm 11, I'm 2, put those 11s together. But I'm also the 11 because the I and I, the Gemini, etc. Also a fan of 12. So, yeah, open, flexible to numbers and, working on paper. So, not as tuned in or whatever, paying attention. There's no clock on my paper. And I'm now, right now, they're turning on a light, but got up early because I took the whole first day. I've been trying. I'm like, I'm going to take a day off. Maybe I'll take a half day off and da-da-da. But it's hard for me to do that for a lot of reasons. I am 100% all for, relaxing, fun, not working. But I have so much I want to accomplish, so much I need to accomplish as well. See, there again, I don't. But I don't need to do anything. But, drawing that line, keeping that line flexible, that's like what I was writing. Here, I'll just pop open the camera instead of this guy, which is boop. Oh, maybe that's why. Let's see. I took away a lot of permissions. Oh, there we go. Allow when using, and microphone as well, and that. Boop. Just because I am trying to tighten up and efficiency, etc., my devices. And specifically for me, it's a little hard. What? Oh, because I'm using that. All right. But this is what I was doing. That's page 2. Here, I might as well take a picture. Hey, let's see here. I'm not a flash user. But I don't know what I was saying. Page 2, I am doing my distinction between work and not work, pleasure, whatever. They're not because I do as much as possible of making there not be a line. Ideally you want to love your work so that it doesn't feel like a chore, a bore, I have to, something to like get through, so that you can, enjoy your time, your life, your family, yourself, whatever. And I made that sort of distinction a long time ago. And, my work-life distinction became much clearer, not fully clear, because I got run over by a truck. And, that certainly in the short term took away my ability to take care of my needs, even like basic needs. And then, as I healed and went back to work, at that point in my life, I was, doing art mostly for fun, a little bit for money. But, my early 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 is when I got run over. But, I've always been like, yay, money. I love it. I enjoy it. I recognized it as a tool really, 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 really early on. Like, I don't even know. I don't know if I ever thought of money as not a tool, or, more than a tool, because, in the society that we live in, which is not a barter economy, modern money economy, how you think about money, your relationship with money specifically, is, to me, and, I recognize that that's privilege, being able to, I was born into the opportunity to see money not from a place of fear. My daughter and I were talking about this, within the, this past week, about, parents and how they talk about money in front of their kids, and also, your thinking is kind of like pretty set. Your foundational core personality, you're just like, your DNA sort of thinking is pretty set by age 7. I'm not a pro on, neurology or developmental psychology. I feel like at least, to age 12 and a half, I am an expert on parenting. I had 30-some years, I don't know exactly, I do the math, but as a child, paying attention to the parent-child relationship from my perspective as a child, an adult child, etc., but also paying attention to other people, other parents and their kids, and, cause and effect. And I was catalog, that is a word that I just heard recently. I was like, yes, that's it. My aversion to boxes and labels, but also, the obvious nature of, like, it helps to classify, quantify, categorize, catalog things. You know, our human brains work with groups just naturally. It's a efficiency thing. But it's important to recognize that that is all it is, really is. It's a processing speed issue, I'm pretty sure. Those are the kind of things that, like, with me personally, this is like a little side whatever, but I realized, like, before I had any book knowledge, which, as far as like the Claires, I've stopped saying I'm not psychic because I want to I want to quote be able to say I'm psychic. It's not about the ability to say it. I've got to really, really, really know something before I say it, claim it, whatever, especially about myself, for a lot of reasons, you know, self-protection, not wanting to be wrong. The reason for not wanting to be wrong has shifted from an ego place to consideration of other people's ego space. It doesn't happen much, you know, probably because, although, you know, that was a secret of mine, like, you know, not wanting to be wrong. I put on the facade of like, oh, I don't care, you know, when I did, for whatever reason, fitting in, respect, etc. But, you know, and just personal, like a game. For example, like when I would not know something, but like it's in there somewhere, like a word or a name or some factoid, I would be like, don't tell me, you know, not because, and I used to get fucking frustrated and irritated and whatever, when people would do it, you know, only really if they did it. My level of dissatisfaction was whether somebody was doing it on purpose to, like, oh, haha, just be funny, or not, you know, not give a shit about the whys of me saying, don't tell me, but making it very clear that please let me figure it out. And then this is something that shifted. It was probably one of my, like, earlier shifts, that it was like, an interior thing where, like, I would get so bothered by it and whatever that, like, until I either found that piece of information, which, you know, was much harder to do without technology and especially, you know, the internet. But I couldn't rest until I knew something. A little piece that I was, before in case I lose it completely, because I wasn't planning on doing this. I haven't even made a recording in a while, but it was with my Claires, that have, you know, been a part of my life, possibly, you know, very likely. I brought them with me into this life. Not that there's a distinction, but that's a different story. But, you know, in terms of thinking of like birth and then what came before my birth, as into, you know, this life and then past life, and or, you know, whatever you're thinking is, mine is past life. Although that's changed-ish. But, you know, I've always been an introspective little soul. But, you know, I've known that I knew stuff before, and I didn't know, how to, you know, put a label on that, which is clairsentience, clair-knowing, which clair means clear, although, whatever, but, you know, psychic, mediumship, etc. That was a part of me, you know, like I was saying, either always or, well, I can claim yes with 100% certainty. It's always been a part of me. It's part of you. Even if you're like against that kind of stuff, if you think it's evil, if you're like a hardcore Christian or, whatever your religion, well, it's religion because spirituality is more open. I define spirituality as belief and understanding and what principles, etc., without dogma, whether it be Judeo-Christian or Muslim or whatever. A lot of people, for whatever reason, including myself, I used to be like, not like it's bad, but like, Ouija boards, witchy stuff. I was like, hadn't gotten to the point where like witchy, where all the woos were the same. It was just the tools of, magic, spirit, etc. In spirituality, the use of tools of making connection with, your higher self, the spirit world, God. I call all of that the PTB, the powers that be, which I'm included in that, which is going to be one of my next pages. So whether you believe in it or not, it's in you. Hopefully it's something you're like, yay. Like, hopefully that's like, oh, good. I was hoping, but I didn't think that, I had that ability or whatever. Absolutely you do. We all do. We brought it with us, whether from, nothingness, if that's your perception of, your existence before birth, before, sperm meets egg and successfully creates life, DNA, the science of you. I believe, I can't say 100% no, because I'm smart enough to know not to. Certainty is, it's nice, but it can, as much as it is a positive thing, a positive tool, it can also be a huge hindrance. Being rigid in your certainty, which I think is on page 2. Did I flip back to... there's page 1. So, oops. I don't... Oh, that's weird and kind of cool. Ooh, it doesn't change the thing. Did I close my camera? I'm like, what's going on here? But, rigid. There we go. I don't know what I'm doing, but in your thinking is problematic, I hadn't quite gotten to that, but this is one of my, pieces of universal knowledge. One of my knowings, like, I know this, and God strike me down if I'm wrong. Well, good thing I'll just get back up again, because I am permanent infinite, never, like, just like, the universe, everything in existence and not in existence. Yep, that's a little tricky, sticky wicket. It already is. If it's possible, it exists. As soon as you think it, boop, well, there it is. It exists in that person's thinking. That artist's, brain idea for a movie, for a whatever. Me flying on a dragon, that exists now because I just said it. Now it exists even bigger because you're hearing this. So, so that's all that's about. But, so being open, I have found for me personally, being, I'm pretty fucking smart. And the way that I got to this point of being able to say that, yes, I have taken IQ tests and whatever, but that's just one test, one whatever, like, oh yeah, I'm in Mensa, which I'm not. That's one of the things, like, yeah, I don't really want to be wrong. I don't want to spend the, like, whatever it is. I don't know. I think it's like $40 or something to take the test to be able to, claim that. But that's like a perfect example of, my ego, whatever. Like, yeah, I don't want to try and fail, but really it's just about, I'm not going to spend the money until I'm pretty damn sure that I'll pass the test. If I ever do decide to do that. I'm the same way with gambling, which this is a little secret that I usually tell people I'm about to gamble with. But I don't make bets unless either I know I'm going to win to whatever level that is possible, or I can afford to lose the money or lose face or whatever. But, it's about the money generally. So that's why, because I have won the lottery-ish when I was 18. I got the numbers. But, and, wrote them down, didn't play them. Yeah, so for a long time my thinking was like, oh, well, first, like, oh my God, that's possible. That was like impossible before it happened. Then my thinking was for many years, like, oh, that was my one chance, like, that's never going to happen again. I don't know if my thinking was changed by knowing that, people win the lottery multiple times, and apparently lose all of their lottery money and their life gets worse each and every time because they don't learn from their past experience. They turn that gift into, whatever. Not a learning experience, but so at some point, and I'm sure it was tied in more about my belief system and saying, like, why would I think such a thing? Like, why would I limit my possibility to only one chance, when I had already seen many impossible things happen, pregnancy without the necessary, what one would think, like the Immaculate Conception, somebody being healed of cancer by my mom, and the power, the PTB, mostly Kuan Yin, and some crystals. That's the kind of thing that, either you think that that's impossible, you think people that say that it's possible are crazy or stupid, and those that claim that they have experienced it, whether witnessed it or whatever, or have done it or experienced it themselves, are lying, or they've tricked themselves somehow. If they're not consciously lying, they have somehow, like people with near-death experiences, NDEs, the scientific community, although that is shifting, which that's one of the things that I knew from the time that I was, a kid. I'm going to just say kid for the sake of ease, until I was, legally, whatever, not a kid, at 18. So when I was a kid, I just knew that science, and I used to say for all of those years, science and religion would come together and realize that, it wasn't an us and them, right and wrong. It was like, oh, we're talking about the same thing in a different language. I just knew it. And, get into that, not right now more, but, so that is the same kind of thing I'm talking about. Like, I didn't even know what the hell I was talking about. Like, I'd never read about, theoretical physics, and barely even basic science, biology. I don't know if I've passed a biology class to date in my life. I didn't graduate high school until after high school. And, for a lot of reasons, mostly my own doing, but moving from California to Maryland in the middle of high school, and going from a Laguna Beach high school, which was more creative and more open to the educational everything, like, oh yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give you credit for that, because you got the learning that education should be about. It shouldn't, in my opinion, it's not about, and shouldn't be about, regurgitation of factoids, like, that's great and useful, but depending on, your job, your future occupation, are you going to be able to make a living out of that? That's where it's like, well, I felt that way about math too. I'm like, well, shit, because at that point, we definitely had calculators, but in, I don't know, I think nope, not 7th grade. No, I think it was 7th grade, was, computers. Like, I took my first computer class in either 7th or 8th grade, and shortly thereafter, and or before, my parents had computer for business, and because they were entrepreneurs, computer at home, but mostly that wasn't until Maryland, really, that there was distinct, like, and only working from home, because technically, like, the move was early retirement. But we went from the future into the past in many, many ways. from the modern world, modern thinking, whatever, to the 50s, basically. They bought a farm, and the Mason-Dixon line ran through the 56 acres of property, and the KKK, in their full regalia, marched down Main Street. Things that, like, I was hyper aware of racism and privilege and whatnot in Laguna, where, at least like in 7th grade, my boyfriend was the only black kid in our school. By high school, there was, and he had older brothers that had already, that weren't in, I never went to school with them, but there was another one for sure, but maybe, I don't know how many, like, total by the time I left there, but very few black families in Laguna Beach and or South Laguna in my school district. The poor kids were Mexican families, and or other Hispanic, but primarily Mexican immigrants, or I didn't know the status. That was very hush hush secret, because it was dangerous, and I'm sure all the kids were warned and told, like, you're not allowed to get into the specifics of, and they may not have even known or whatever. But anyway, that's a little side thing. But yeah, computers, education, yada yada, religion versus spirituality, useful stuff, awareness for me. I grew up in a family that tried to be religious when, my brother and I were little. I don't remember how old. I do know that the last church we ever went to was in Laguna, so sometime after elementary school, but definitely, like, the kibosh was put on. We were not, as kids, like most kids, they hate church or whatever. My brother, he was the ringleader of anti-establishment of any kind, like, no church, no school, no government, anarchist through and through. Probably before he knew what anarchy was, but he knew that he didn't want and wouldn't let anyone have any sort of control or authority over him. I grew into that, and I'm still, he grew in the other direction out of necessity, with, for needs of housing and basically money, his parts of himself that are, disabilities in modern commerce functioning, make it difficult to put a roof over your head, feed your dog, etc. Where I was able to recognize him and put that necessary label on him, like, hey, just like I was, with myself, it was the opposite. Like, I didn't want to claim disability at all, period, until it was absolutely necessary. And I did it way later than, a smart person, someone as smart as me should have. But initially it was, when I got run over, I had a job and was in the middle of a promotion in my job. I was catering and was, about to take over my boss's job and be a catering manager when I got run over. On the night before my first solo job, which I don't remember, it was either, I'm pretty sure, in trying to piece the information together and the likelihood of the scenario, I'm pretty sure it was a rehearsal dinner that I was going to do. And then after that was the wedding. And we were, I'm fairly sure, contracted for both, but the rehearsal dinner or, some pre-wedding thing that wasn't as important. Like if I'd fucked it up, I wouldn't have ruined someone's wedding. That's how I figured out, oh, no, it wasn't someone's wedding. It was, the rehearsal dinner and or cocktail party with food situation that I went out the night before. And, I was 23. I had the energy and the artificial energy from cocaine of being able to get up and do my job at whatever time in the evening or early afternoon. So going out drinking and partying with, this girl that I had a huge crush on and had just gotten together with. Big love of my life, one of them. So I wasn't gonna miss out on that night. So I was irresponsible and whatnot, but for me it was just like gambling. It was a calculated risk. And my work ethic is, strong. It's important to me. I'm a little bit of a workaholic, which I've been working on. I think I might have started this with saying, I took the whole day off yesterday. Yeah, I did. I was talking about that, because it's something I've been working on as I prepare and know that, more work is coming. But I'm also homeless-ish right now. So I've got a lot on my plate. I've got a lot, like I said, a lot of shit to get done. I'm in a holding pattern. I'm living in a hotel and waiting to get into affordable housing, which is a combination of long-term affordable housing and a little bit of help until that comes through, because there's a housing crisis in our country that I tried to solve in part by going back to school to finish my degree and student housing. But I would have lost that housing anyway, because they're closing down this amazing building at Portland State University that I had, just moved into at the end of last summer. And shortly thereafter found out that oh, hey, you live in Blackstone. Well, the building's really old and we're not sure what we're going to do with it yet, but it's not going to be student housing anymore. So I was like, oh, that's a bummer, because I loved it. Built in 1920 something, Art Deco architecture. My daughter, who never experienced that, was kind of like, oh, okay, oh, it's okay. She was just stoked. She learned to love it, and for the same reasons I do. But, you know, the first bath I ran was the very beginning was a really, full-bodied medium tea color. That then, I was like, oh, okay, I can live with this. It's a bathtub, which I didn't have, before that. I mean, I did. I had access to a bathtub and a shower where I was living, but in my little shack, the bathroom was inside the house. So I was just stoked to have a bathtub specifically, which even though I had it, taking a bath in a house with two other adults, so three adults, a teenage girl, and, a 12-year-old boy who, like, he would have been like, oh, whatever, same with the teenage girl, but would have been like just only not said anything and been okay with it, as long as it didn't, interfere with her, teenage girl who wears a lot of makeup and hairdos and all of that, who is like, get out of the bathroom. She was the problem in the house of using the one bathroom before I got there. So I just, tended to just like pop in for a shower at night, or, off hours, just out of politeness and, my own freedom, my feeling of like, yeah, I have a right to be here and whatever. But I try to be a good, conscientious community member wherever I am. And so, yeah, like I like to enjoy my shower and or whatever. But baths for my pain, it's a highly beneficial pain management tool. So I just looked at the clock. Oh, 42:42. Let me just say, if especially if this is your first video here, Snarky Sifu, and you made it this far, like, yeah, but this is how I roll. I may or may not ever change that. There's part of me that thinks that I would like to, but not at the expense of my authenticity and my uniqueness. I bring something different from everyone else out there, just like you do. You are the only you. And even if there's, 100,000, a million people doing the thing that you would like to do for work to, pay for your life, you're the only one who can do it exactly like you do. And, some people in my life, I'm going to limit it to like one person specifically, thinks that my thinking that is, not only a thing, but then, a good thing, and much less a vital thing. It is your gift. It is your most valuable resource that you bring into life in general, but work, but especially if it is you working for yourself. Like for me, as an intuitive counselor / content creator as a part of, my work, doing this exactly is no different than a face-to-face, session, other than, I have to tailor it to, not knowing who is on the receiving end, if anyone is even on the receiving end. But I do know that if I stay true to myself and ignore that one person, which, I did from the beginning, but it infected my thinking over, 15 years of hearing it. Well, not even, I never heard it, still to this day, but it was made clear that it was, a thing. Me being not valuable in terms of, my output. The value is not recognized, which is fucking crazy. Everyone else in my life, even people that have just barely known me, and this person has benefited, openly, like undeniably, from my skill set, my tools in my toolbox, has benefited, like I could come up with a number, very lowballed, of course, which is something that in general in business, in selling something to someone that is resistant, you want to make your sales presentation, including and especially the bottom line, the number, at the least, doable, like, acceptable, and then obviously attraction, going up from there, and making it desirable, as a business person, marketing, etc. That's the goal, which is difficult for me, not because I'm not good at it, but perhaps even more because I am good at it, and, not wanting to come off as egocentric or whatever, because that turns people off. It turns me off. So I've been in, like, the lessons that I learned from this person, who's the first person in my life, maybe other than my brother, but he didn't look at me transactionally, which is good. Like, I'm not, that is something that I try to avoid, in my thinking, in my relationships, like what this person can do for me, what I can do for them. More it's on the receiving end, and which is why, which is part of that authenticity that is offensive to some people, is that I'm not in it for the money. My relationship with money, which I do know that I brought up, is, I know that it will come, and or I can survive without it because of my skill set, my intelligence, my experience, whatever, including, choosing, quote, homelessness, choosing it already. This time I became homeless because the first stage of it was through a separation, and then after 2 years of separation turning to, divorce paperwork, and no longer any joining of resources, at least in my direction. So being that my dollars, my income is limited to my disability, I couldn't pay for our apartment that at that time my daughter and I were living in, and we were split custody situation, and I was trying to divorce myself financially entirely, like as soon as possible, even before, when I knew that was the best thing for our relationship, and I was working on, do-it-yourself separation, divorce, custody, maybe like, support, child support, and or spousal support, based on like, oh shit, I've never had a kid before, and when I left my life and went on my adventure to Kauai, I was, a 20-something single person taking a huge leap of faith, again, calculated risk, gamble, but worst case scenario is it would be like, oh, oopsie, that wasn't the best idea. And, giving up my apartment, and at that point in my life, my monthly income was about $400. So, to provide housing, food, and anything else, medicine, clothing, blah, 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 blah. So, choosing to give all of that up, to take a leap of faith that I didn't know exactly, but at the time I did it, I knew that it was something that had been presented to me by Kuan Yin in my, as a kid. Again, I'm going to, just for the ease of me not having to think about it and or whatever, honesty, integrity, which is fucking just so important to me. I don't want to lie to you ever, which is why I don't usually use absolutes in my speech, because I don't want to lie to you ever. So like with my daughter, she knows, when I promise something, it means like unless I absolutely cannot, or it would be highly, highly detrimental to me, because I will go as hard as I can. And I'm learning to, like, okay, which is more important, my health and my whatever, or being true to my word. Well, they're both really important, but as a parent, I will put my word above, my health, my comfort, my whatever. My daughter appreciates that, and it's one of the things, which is part of what I'm doing and will be doing with clients that I hadn't before, is parenting, a parenting coach, basically, relationships of any kind, but being a parent was something that, I've gone back and forth of wanting, and, I think I've always wanted to be a parent, but not being at a place where I was comfortable with it, making that commitment to another human, It's why I didn't choose to have dogs. And, only had, well, actually I had 2 dogs in my semi-adult life, but, one dog in my fully adult life that was a horrible, stupid decision by me and my love that I had mentioned, but she loves dogs even to this day, that's her job, is, she's an animal care business. I don't know exactly what she does, but it's, dog walking business that, I'm sure it is, her services, I'm sure, include more than, just dog walking, but caring for other people's animals. And, I don't know how many animals she has, how many dogs and cats, but, I would never date somebody who didn't, love animals to the point of, possibly irresponsibility. Ideally, to that level. But at this point, certainly if I were to ever live with another adult, that irresponsibility is much more important, which is why in my marriage, so let me finish that. My own one dog, the other dog that I had, we had dogs growing up, but the dog before, Rosie was the name of the dog, that was the dumb, in every way, just fucking stupid. She was a Dalmatian puppy bought from a breeder, Amish breeder, which wouldn't do, rescue 100%, although that has shifted to possibly would do in the future if I could afford a breeder and really, really there was a sole contract with a dog, a puppy dog, that, that was the only path to making that soul connection contract, whatever, happen. I would look for, if I had a breed specific, I was thinking about getting a dog before I just rescued my kitty. But still, with my disability and whatnot, because I really am attracted to big dogs. Big dumb dogs. But, so anyway, we got this Dalmatian puppy from a breeder, pre-internet, real knowledge, unless you had it, that breeders are just not the way to go when there's so many animals. And I had the same thinking with children. So many souls that are in need of loving homes and families, that I was that's what my thinking was with kids and animals. In my history of having animals, I think that was my only, oh, well, yeah, I bought a dog for someone, but that was the only way I could, because you couldn't go to the shelter and adopt a dog as a gift for someone. So I bought somebody a puppy once. That ended up costing her dad, oops, still have this sucker open, costing her dad money because, and this is another reason with purebred dogs and anything, genetically they're inferior, because, if you believe God put this whole situation in motion, made the blueprints, and set it up with Adam and Eve in the garden and the rules and whatnot, mixing. We're supposed to mix species and, well, maybe, I don't know, species, maybe not, but races, genetics. We're supposed to mix it up to get the strengths, from each other, not to the point of, eugenics, Nazi thinking, weeding out the bad stuff. But, technically they're onto something, but, they're just wrong about the facts. But that's what evolution does, it filters out the inferior, the weak, the whatever. We lost our tails because we didn't need them, all of that stuff. But so I I bought, I don't know, I think it was $250 or whatever lab puppy costs. I got a lab for someone as a birthday present, and who wanted a dog, but the dog fell off of a futon that was on the ground and broke her femur. So luckily, her dad is, either like, a millionaire or higher. I don't know exactly, but, a fucking East Coast, multiple house, Cape Cod ski house, Hawaii house, whatever, like, serious money. So, he could afford it, but was also like teaching the value of whatnot. Interestingly, just talking about money and the relationship and whatnot. The person that I bought the dog for was on the fear side of money relationship, not quick to be generous, not because, she didn't have a generous heart, but just for whatever reason, her the way that she was raised. Although I was friends with her sister first, and she had, her money relationship was much more in line with mine. Loved it, generous with it, recognized that it brings a whole lot of goodness into a person's life, and was aware of the politics of money, and that, in our country and worldwide, it's really fucked up and unfair, and the inequality, and, I think that she is an impact investor. I'm not 100% sure, but so, clearly, like, money was important, And like we fucking enjoyed the hell out of, both of ours. At that time I had a baby trust fund, and she had a dad that was footing the bill for her education in San Francisco, and we lived it up. Like we fucking bought food and whatever fun, and just the best. Like that's who I like to be financially in relationships with, business, household, whatever. Like if you can be aligned in your money values, ideally with a really positive relationship with money. If you have two people who have their individual relationships with money are really awesome, positive, whatever they look like, without the fear, like the least amount of fear, the highest amount of flow, and ideally responsible as well. I didn't pay attention to the responsibility part as much. That's something you learn from being irresponsible with your money, being overly generous, impulse buying and whatever. That's, but that's something that if it's the equivalent of winning the lottery. Well, the first time you win and you have your relationship that is your relationship with money, and you're buying shit for people, you're living it up, you're buying the car of your dreams, and then three more, your money's gonna go quick. It's just like finding the sweet spot of thinking about, like, do I need this? Do I want it? Why? Long term, short term, but having your heart remain open. Like I have the same level of generosity, whether I have, $5 in my pocket or I have $5,000. It just, the amount that I can, share with other people is, goes up and down accordingly ish. But, I tend to err ish on the side of generosity because that is my relationship with money, is that, I have almost no fear, and when fear creeps in, I'm like, no, that's no bueno, because fear stops the flow. You're building up a wall. Like, this is why I like to do stuff digitally. If I'm with a person, I have like a hand gesture, or if I'm like sitting on the ground. Let's see where we're at here. Alright, that'll work. So, here you can see like the flow, but with money here, I'll do if you're sitting in front of me, I would do like, probably just be like sitting here shooting the shit, whoop, my little whatever. Can't do the full whatever, but Kuan Yin used to say, like, put your hands in the manner of receiving. So that'd be like, palms up. Sorry, you can't see that as well. But, hands in the manner of receiving. Keep in mind, I'm not just receiving. We're talking about flow here. Whatever it is, but specifically, money, resources. Here's the flow from, the universe, powers that be, that infinite, that can literally make money grow on trees and not just literally paper wise. Abundance, unlimited. And that's tricky, because even if you know it and you believe it, you still get tripped up by like this human experience and your upbringing and your life as it goes. Like, you can forget and not like no, like 100% with all of your being that like this infinite abundance is available, and so much more than you can even imagine what is possible. Flowing in, and then like this, I do like a little hand thing, like whoop whoop, coming in, flowing it out, right? And then here's me, like, while I'm just doing this without paying attention to what I'm, keeping for myself, whether it's money or whatever, it's growing as, I'm flowing. So, snarky seafood pro tip. But wisdom, intelligence, life experience, you learn to, like, okay, the least amount of energy that you can put forth, and this is that, like, muscle memory, knowing, like, it's in your fucking DNA, it's so hard that you don't have to think about it and put that thought energy, but you should, be aware to whatever degree, making sure that you are paying attention just enough as is necessary. That's the trick, that's the like fun, that's the game, that's the monopoly of it, is, I go into Monopoly like knowing I'm gonna win, and I do. I almost always win, unless, now I am teaching my daughter. We've only played Monopoly maybe once, maybe twice, because, I'm not the only parent or, adult. She and I have never played there, and now she's getting a little older. The degree to which, as a parent, letting her win, and what that teaches her, when I'm playing with my friends, I'm like, me, like, and whether or not, how many times and whatnot, but like, it's also now, it's like, it's more fun for me just to not give a shit, but like, the whole time, my whole life of playing Monopoly, and I'll tell you my secret, okay? When I was younger, I would be like, yay, Park Place, the two blue guys over here. Those are the ones, like everybody. But for almost as like an anti-move, but then it became like, okay, like my strategy, it's like wabi-sabi. It's seeing the value in the trash. I did it with my art, found object, whatever. I started with these guys, and I fully got into my character, playing Monopoly, like, to whatever degree. Like, I was a slumlord slash, pimp. Like, fully, these were, drug dealer. Like, I didn't, like, I'm talking more about the character and whatever, more than I actually ever did. But pretty much, like, in my thinking, like, and just joking around and whatnot, these two properties, that's where I started. And again, maybe this is like, knowing or not, payday, you know? So the way that you guys all spend, the level of responsibility or whatever, and in real life, uh, these properties, and me taken to the extreme of, like, drugs and prostitutes, and flop houses, and whatever this neighborhood is. And, in a larger context, what kind of life you've had, getting here and going around and around the board. And the pain, maybe, like, is why you do drugs. People use medicine and or drugs. Like, there's a fine distinction for me, but I'm also a medicine person, who got run over by a truck and, has a wealth of personal knowledge, as well as, decades and decades of, shamanic, whatever, medicine woman knowledge. Medicine, we'll just call it medicine, is to medicate generally pain or deficit in some aspect of your being, whether it's, usually your body for, pain medicine, and or mental. So I don't judge people that self-medicate. I was a little, and, even more than a little, like, pissy with, but still, like, above all my thinking, it generally was, like, outward, more than, my own pile. But, the way society and people's lack of education and or consciousness about medicine and pain and physiology and psychology and all of the things, which is, why, like, ideally, medicine dispensing is left to the professionals. But you put this in there, and now the professionals, like, their motive is not, do no harm, and how can we best help this person? And that's a evolving situation, with medicine, opiates especially. Just, if you haven't caught on, what I'm talking about here. But getting run over when I was 23, I had some broken bones and whatnot, and but I had almost zero experience with opiates, beyond, although later I realized that I did have some experience through my mom, who had a double mastectomy, but I didn't, I wasn't personally paying attention to pain and pain management and the huge life complexities of that, until became a part of my everyday life, which, goes back to something that I started with disability and my, saying, okay, I'm disabled. I cannot make a living, working for somebody else and them relying on me to not ruin their wedding, because I had just had my pelvis and foot crushed by a however many 1,000-pound truck. But I was my work ethic was oh shit, I have to call my boss. I'm supposed to do this wedding thing today. What day is it? My name is. I can wiggle my fingers. I can wiggle my toes. Those are all little future Easter eggs if you stay with me until we get there again. But I knew without, because I was almost exclusively a drinker as a kid. Very, very limited experience with pills, and that just wasn't. It was 90% drinking, and then 8% cocaine added in, and well, maybe no, more 6%, and then 4% psychoactive, pharmaceutical, whatever. And the stronger, pot was pretty much my primary psychotropic. There we go. That was the word I was looking for. Input, because I I came into this life already seeing and thinking, and without much need. And I had a greater and greater understanding of this as I got older. But when I would do more than smoke pot, and even pot was oof, that's too much for me. The control factor, that is the thing with me, that is a fine line and whatnot. Giving up control to anything, a substance, whatever. I guess I've always been, without realizing, or the realization, and then the synthesizing the awareness of being somebody who likes to be as in control and let go of control, and playing with that line. But generally, beyond my thinking, with physical reality, whether it be, money or substances or actions or words or whatever, definitely on the control side. But with my thinking and my openness on the flow side, and stretching that line, that if I'm doing a movement with my hands here, I'm oh, you can see the shadow. No, you can't. I'm oh yeah, see, I'm not doing the camera. But, expanding that, the boundaries, the rigidness, bamboo. That's me, not water, not an oak tree, bamboo, So expanding that, stretching that muscle of letting go of control, which is a thing about trust, faith, experience wisdom, ultimately discernment. Ding, 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 ding. Snarky Sifuism. That's key. If we're going to have a little kiki about kiki, that's an old school word for Coke. But anything, discernment is key. And that's something that experience brings. But I lost my little choo-choo for a second there with the kiki. That's what threw me off, because that wasn't in my natural flow. But yeah, caution, but expansion, safety, but expansion, boundaries, not walls, just like pictures, like metaphors, actualities. So, payday, bing, 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 bing. I think about you guys and, myself, but this is just Monopoly, right? It is, but it also is more than Monopoly. It's, this whole thing. Is it a game? Is it an experiment? Are we fucking avatars in a giant computer? Who knows? I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. The rules, the principles, the whatever, the physics, for me, it doesn't matter. Am I alive right now? Yes. Am I dead? Maybe. Doesn't matter. That's a little huh? That threw you off. Like Dark Night of the Soul people, especially if you've had near-death experience that you came back from. If your mind is expansive for whatever reason, including, mental health labels that you've been given that may or may not be appropriate. I should probably throw in my, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't have any kind of, license and the insurance and liability that goes along with it. I'm not going to say that my channel, my whatever, is purely for entertainment. Because it's not. It is education and hopefully entertainment, but ultimately education. Otherwise, I'd, be doing something else that that I could charge more money for. That I didn't have to concern myself, ethically about my integrity and whatnot, because we would both be coming to the table, the theater, the whatever, knowing that this is an entertainment agreed upon relationship, transaction, financially and whatever, services for resources traded. But it's not that. And my integrity, my uniqueness, I'm the only one who can offer you exactly what I can, which for me includes not saying entertainment only. There's tons of people out there on YouTube and whatever, saying entertainment only when they're doing tarot readings or whatever it is that they are sharing with you. That's not what I'm doing. So I'm not going to lessen, take away the, intrinsic value of saying that this is just entertainment, because it's not. That's not what they're doing. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, I can't say. But also, you have a lot of people out there, with coaching certificates, bought and paid for the purpose of, that province, that seal of approval, of authority, of, intrinsic expected expertise or knowledge. A physician, takes an oath of do no harm, and that is not the case. I make a distinction in my personal life now. A person who is 54 and 2 months, June 15th, it's my birthday, and I got run over May 19th, 1995, just before I turned 24. So that's how long I've been dealing with doctors and pain and medicine. And prior to that, I had interactions. It was mostly, mental health stuff, depression, anxiety. I was diagnosed with adult ADD when I was, 22. I don't know when I got, Ritalin for the first time. But it wasn't, I'm not in the generation. I'm just, Gen X is, they're medicating our kids, and, even before that, like, I dated someone, my last boyfriend, was a Ritalin kid, who was like, it ruined my life, he was 21 and I was 30, what was I? 34, maybe? Yeah, I think. I met my ex-wife. I had just had my 35th birthday. And I have not dated anyone, male or female, since we got together. And we just had what would have been, to see that, I don't know, I go backwards. My daughter is 12 and a half. We were together for 5 years before, so 17, 18, probably 18. I'm going to stick with that. I'm planting that seed in my head. 18 years. Our, relationship anniversary, which we just agreed, which was, it started on August 3rd, but it was the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. It was our, which one is it? When we, met, agreed to, we're doing this thing, or, ran away to the jungle, or, I don't know, maybe, had some sort of, sexual encounter, beyond just, kissing and making out. But it was, that was the distinction. So, but we just had, and agreed to, I made the executive decision, I guess, of just one day for the sake of clarity, and, not needing 3 days. Our first, pal-versary, friend-versary, because we have both agreed, and, really recently, in the past since January 1st, but, even then it was still like, it was only penciled in friendship, but, very, very recently, and I asked, after we joked, and I said, okay, this is officially our friendiversary, that next year it'll be our first one, if we make it. But I was still like, I think about those things. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, are we gonna make it? I don't know. And then shortly after, keep in mind, this is the person who I am, I've been separated from since 2022, and I knew for at least 5 years that, like, we were heading in that direction, whether it was me like consciously being aware that that is where we should be, is no longer married and cohabitating, but coming up with the strength, the resolve, the, like, am I sure, like, is there no chance of fixing this relationship, that we can make it work, going back and forth on that, but knowing I was not happy. My happiness, 80% of that came from my interior life and my outlook, my whatever, my thinking, and then exterior, of course, my kiddo, but that is like a joy that in relationship, it's just shifting to be more rewarding than work, I guess. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but hopefully you're not judging me and whatever. If you are, if you're like, oh, she's a bad mom, only 20% of her joy, then you can fuck off. But seriously, it's just like I thought about being a parent, long before I ever said okay to the PTB, the universe, myself, etc., and had sex without a condom, with the last male I was with, who I was just talking about, knowing that, like, at that point I wasn't sure if I could get pregnant because of my injuries, but I still had my period, so I knew it was like, whatever, but I didn't care. And, I was open to it, or not closed to it. I was also at that point thinking about maybe going and spending some time in a monastery, a Buddhist monastery, because I was like, all right, Kauai, I was kind of like, got what I came there for. I just felt energetically it was wrapping up, and that was kind of like, okay, what am I going to do next? And I was working for my ex's dad. I was friends with him. He really wanted to swoop me up in every way. He saw my value, business value, personal, whatever. Like, he fell in love with me, heart, mind, body, everything. And I was like, whoa, I was not, none of those things were on my mind. We were friends, and I was testing the waters of, working for him. I was totally fine with, but it was shifting to, more of, will you work with me? And, we were still in the, like, yes, trial run. And when his daughter and her boyfriend came to the island for the summer. And yeah, all my plans, went right out the window because, you know, whatever, you know. And I put it out there like I pre-planned this, you know, before this life, and or, you know, the universe, the PTB, the powers that be, are like, plop. Okay, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna take door number 1? Or, you know, keep looking for door number ? And I was like, absolutely not to door number 1, but everything, you know, pheromones and looks and what, like all the other things that attract people to people, although not even in the like way that normally, you know, and two, I think at that point I was in a phase of, and being more certain, but not rigid, of like, I'm done with women, like, you know, being with a boy is easier and whatever. But really it was like, I don't want to be with anyone. That's truly where I was at, you know. It's like, I just want to be a nun, you know, but not, I wanted to be, if anything, a Buddhist monk, because, you know, just whatever, a little old personal grudge against Buddhists. Why, like, out of any possible religion, I like the fact that Buddhism technically is not a religion, but it had most of the, like, dogma, the ritual, the rules, the whatever. A whole, like, a duck. Is it a duck? It looks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. No, it's Buddhism. It is not a duck. But when I found out that women couldn't be monks, I was pissed. I was like, fuck that sexist bullshit. You know, I hadn't gotten to the point in my life where I had ever thought about gender much beyond, like, you know, am I bisexual? Or, like, what's going on? Because I hadn't thought about that either until it happened. But, you know, now I know that gender is a construct, you know. It is just like race, but they sure as shit look real. I'm trying to make this go away. Maybe it's not supposed to. But, like, again, I'm like, don't box me in. I don't give a fuck. Other than, like, other people giving a fuck about me being with a woman versus we've always been with boys, you know. Like, oh, oopsie, you know. I got drunk one night and hooked up with a girl. And then looked back at my life and I was like, oh, maybe I was in love with, you know, boop, boop, boop. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm way off track. I don't remember what the hell I was just talking about, except for, you know, I had thought about not being a pimp, but a friend of mine in, you know, I think we were either in 7th or 8th grade, talked about, you know, as a job, like prostitution. And I was like, you know, maybe, like, high money call girl. I'm like, yeah, I'd be open to that. Like, that sounds kind of fun, but without, you know, thinking about all of the actualities of it, you know, just like I knew that, like, I did not want to fuck with opiates because, you know, like with coke, I had dibble-dabbled, and had even freebased This was like, I don't know, like the parallel lines. I'm guessing they, were running parallel, poverty, it's crack, rich people, it was freebase, but they're essentially the same thing. Quality wise, I don't know. I tried smoking crack once and I didn't like it. It gave me a headache. It didn't, give me even the like, woohoo, this is fun of, snorting coke. And way back when, still in high school, when I tried freebasing, and it was amazing. Like, it was amazing. And I was like, okay, that's dangerous. And the person that, actually, both of the people that I did it with, one of them became, like, his whole life was destroyed. I don't know if he's alive or not. 80, little cutie pie, who, funny, that my best friend, Christy, she died in a drunk driving accident. But whoopsie, changed my life, in a huge way. But 80, who, my haha was that 80 he looked like Billy Idol, little fucking cutie. He had his two cousins, Mike and Henry? I think maybe Henry? Two brothers who I dated both of them. And 80. And Christy, my best friend, dated 80. And we all freebased. But he was already, in it. And I don't remember. There's some story, but like that he like stole those drugs or whatever. But he had 2 suitcases, drugs and money. And I was like, that sounds sketchy and I don't want to know. Zip, like, I don't want to know any more of that story. And I totally forgot about all of this. And until right now, including, like, I didn't forget that I, freebase, but it's not something that I think about, because it was, isolated, whether I did it once or 4 times or 2 times or whatever. It was that one little boop in my life. And I had, calculated risk, gambler, knew that, like, that was, I liked it, more than I had liked, beer or, peppermint schnapps or marijuana, or whatever. Don't know if I had, like, tripped yet. But, knew, obviously, and I'm thinking, like, being, signing up to be a medicine person in this life, which, looking back, these are all of the experiences before the, okay, this is who you are and this is why you have these experiences and why you have a different relationship than your peers. Why, like, at parties I was, the doctor, for most of my childhood I wanted to be a doctor. Then at some point it shifted to wanting to be a counselor. And hello, and as the other one after that was an artist, and they're all kind of same, but again, unique path. I'm not a psychologist because of the restrictions, education, licensing, blah, 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 blah. I have the integrity and the conscientiousness and the desire to do no harm, and I take that seriously. I've taken it seriously since I was very young, and still do. And I don't share my medicine all willy-nilly, or all of those things. And the reason, obviously, I brought up the freebase was when I got run over. Prior to getting run over, I didn't fuck around with, pills were a little bit of a thing, but it was mostly, like Valium and, benzo, like mood, like happy pills. But being a reader and dark side, shadow work traveler, mostly in artistic form, I knew that opiates, without having any firsthand experience with them, other than what I didn't remember, with my mom, and she had an issue with, although it was Librium specifically, she said, was her thing, from her mastectomy and malpractice, and a doctor who was trying to, disguise it, cover it up, whatever, was giving her lots of medication to keep her, in a state. And then he's my great uncle, but I used to call him Uncle Sam, like he was known as Uncle Sam, but kind of my grandfather on my dad's side, but he was a doctor, and he recognized what was going on with my mom, and cleared that situation up before I was ever aware of it. But I loved junky movies and music, and I was like, woof, I was drawn to that, and the big, heavy, but also like, oh, no. Like, I'm certain that if I am responsible for pre-mapping out, blueprinting, printing my life ahead of time, I was like, no heavy shit until your 20s. Coke and stimulants and whatnot, that is a different category, because that addiction it's mental, period. Like, yeah, it's physical, but just opiates and alcohol are heavy drinkers have, you get to that point where, which I've never, I've known some drinkers and whatnot that, like, as I got older and knew more, but didn't know about addiction treatment and whatnot, where it was still like the red nose and the, the stereotypes, the haha of like a drunk character, uncle, whoever, but without having, the seriousness of alcohol being a thing and whatnot. In my personal social life, but I got real tuned into alcohol as a danger when it killed my best friend. So, but that was, drinking and driving. But my first awareness was culturally, the indigenous population, firewater, And then, like, once I get tuned into, like, okay, this is something as a medicine person, as a healer, that I needed to learn about. But, opiates, ironically, or whatever, were the last. I didn't know anybody who ever ran into trouble, addiction, dependence, whatever, with opiates. And then, I was careful when, like, they were only medicine when they were given to me after, my body shouldn't have been here, was, hello. And it wasn't, briefly. And I had a little, like, chat with my co-conspirators, like, hey, you want to pop back in? And, there are people that will need you or benefit that you haven't met yet. And I'm like, sign me up, Popped into my body, and I was like, hello. Like, I was a mess. I couldn't move. And then I was like, nah, I didn't sign up for this. And then as soon as I could wiggle my fingers and wiggle my toes, and my mind, it was like reciting my name and phone number and social security number. And, when the ambulance got there, and I was like, I can wiggle my fingers, I can wiggle my toes, that's all I kept saying. They're like, okay, hon, like, oh, we're going to cut off your pants. You got a bone sticking out, your pubic bone is out your leg. I was like, whatever, thank God, adrenaline. My daughter asked me, and it didn't occur to me until, because like I said, I don't like to ever lie to people. When she would be like, did it hurt? And, like, historically, I think I answered yes, but, or I don't know, but I feel like I had, but I stopped and thought, and I was like, actually, like, no, it didn't. When I became re-conscious, post the whole, like, death part, even, like, dying, having my little experience, coming back into my body, oh, fuck that, like, paralyzed, no, fucked up head, no, still no pain, thank you, adrenaline, whenever it was, and then, like, I don't remember, I was in and out of consciousness and whatnot, spouting, like, oh no, I need to call my boss, which is like, what? Like, this poor girl is like, she's out of her mind. And I'm like, no, I need to call my boss. Like, I'm like, I have a wedding today. And I don't remember how that, but I made it very clear that I needed that message, that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't out of my mind. I needed, not to ruin this person's day. But I don't remember when I was really back in my body. And, the pain was there. I remember my first memory of pain that made me want to leave my body, where, I was making, apparently, like, ungodly animal, like, death fucking howls, But even that, like, whoop, thankfully, like, that is not. So, like, when somebody says, like, I was thinking about this today. I was watching Naked and Afraid. And, I heard a 7, an 8, and a 9. Like, how much does it hurt? 0 to 10. From a burn and getting whacked with a tree branch. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. But, like, that's the thing, is pain is relative. And with me as a pain patient, that is one of the things where I had to balance my need for integrity and honesty versus my needs of pain management and interpretation. Like, what me being honest and hearing someone being honest and a doctor, receiving that information. Over time, I realized, like, oh, if I say, a 10, like, to me, and, like, technically that is exaggerating, because a 10 was me, like, wanting to leave my body and, like, and or pass out. I don't know. That might have happened, being, whatever morphine I was getting at the time, but it was not fucking working. That's a 10 in my life experience. So it's crazy, truth, reality, all of it, interpretation. I did start to say, like, I got a little aggravated with, people who self-manage pain, not because I have a problem with it. And, that's the thing with these medicine and drugs and, money and all of that. We're not all equally equipped. We all have the same potential, but, all of the things, like, what is your primary motivation? My knuckles are tattooed. I tattooed myself on one hand across my knuckles, LOVE, on the other hand, FEAR. Those are our, base level, under everything else, fear or love as the, like, what motivates you, what propels action or thought or words or whatnot. So I don't hold everyone to the same standard, not even close. I hold myself, like, higher than everyone else, but I am learning to balance the love side of that, the, like, grace side of that, giving myself more. I'm always going to probably give everyone else more than I do. But, like my mom, she didn't give me the same experience as my brother, because she's like, I knew you would always be fine. Like, you didn't need me. And as a parent, I want to not make that same mistake with my kid. She regretted it. She felt bad for it. And I was like, don't feel bad. Like, thank you for saying that now. Because my whole life, I'm like, it's not fair. You love him more than me. And blah, 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 blah. And she even said that, when I asked her, I was like, I demanded of her, like, tell me the truth. You love him more than you love me. And she said that she did. And I was like, thank you. And it changed our relationship for the whole rest of our life. It's what I say to people, I'm like, just don't lie to me, period. Like, if I put you on the spot, like, I'm gonna let you lie and know that you're lying and da 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 da. But, like, don't do it, because things will be better for everyone. if you don't. And, you know, had a similar conversation with my dad, not about love, but like him and his parenting and his depression and his unhappiness in his marriage, where he failed me as a dad. Because my mom was busy, you know, taking care of my brother and putting him first. And my dad and I, it was like, you know, that was the divide, was that, you know, my dad and I were closer most of, you know, our life, the four of us together. And my dad and my mom, ultimately, both of them before they died, like, I was the closest person in either of their lives, and, you know, the person that they counted on, you know, which meant a lot to me. It was my honor, my privilege. It was my pain, you know, growing up, but I wouldn't change a fucking thing. And, you know, it ended like that. You know, my dad died in my arms, and it was, you know, all good in the hood. But yeah, it's a blessing. But, you know, whatever. I'm done. That's all for today, folks. Tune in later for a similar, probably talking about the same stuff, but different, filling in. I'm going to put it out there because I didn't want to before, like, hey, you know, like and subscribe and comment and whatever. But, like, I'm not paying attention to what I'm saying here. Like I said, I may try to do more of that, but not at the expense of, you know, what needs to be said in its, you know, beautiful, fucked up, original, unedited form. But questions, comments, please. Like, did I start fucking talking about something, you know, like being a pimp and a whatever? Oh yeah, high paid call girl, but then I was like, no, I want to be a madam. But, you know, even then, those are the kind of things that I was like, nah, not really. But if I were a madam, I'd be a really good one, you know. Like, I would try to be the kindest and most effective, whatever, protective parent, you know, madam that ever was. But yeah, so anything I left hanging, which I'm sure, based on, you know, when I have listened to these things, let me know. And please, like, interact with me. Now's the time, you know. Right now I only have 6 followers on YouTube, and I'm not actively, you know, using any of the tools, marketing, whatever, you know, not even hashtags. I'm just starting to not, like, fully fuck around with them and just, you know, hashtag, wanted to be a pimp when I was a little girl playing Monopoly, and, like, fully just like, oh haha, like, I don't give a shit. But I'm trying to do less of that, and, you know, more of the right way, without, I still want, you know, I want the right people to end up here, you know, the people who want to be here and, you know, are, quote, meant to be here, and, you know, whatnot. And eventually, you know, you're gonna chip in and support me. I'm not asking for that now, but, I mean, I guess I just did. But remember I told you I'm homeless and on disability, and I am a single, almost divorced co-parent of a 12-and-a-half-year-old amazing little human that I would love to, take on vacation and whatnot. Like our big spending was $100 at Powell's bookstore yesterday, and that's all I got to say on that. Hey, it's 122 22. That's one of my numerology. I'm a master builder, so if you're into numerology, look that up. And if you want to see what my chart is, especially if you have anything that you want to share with me, because that is what you do, ching ching ching, that's my thing. I want to continue, and I've done it with my art. I want to not put a price, hopefully, on any of my services. My game plan, my ideal situation is that you who benefit, give openly, generously from your heart, where it's all like, I want to do this, I can do this, I can afford it, blah 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 blah. And those of you that have big bank accounts, like counting on you in the big scheme to chip in more to build this dream and whatnot. And like sliding scale, basically. That's always worked for me, with my art. It's like I have a donation box out, and you can pay whatever you want, from zero to, fuck, I'm sure Banksy is getting the Banksies for his art or her art. I'd never thought about that. But, yeah, that's all. I'm just like, that's the dream, is to keep it there. But I am like, I need funding, because currently, I have not won the lottery, actually, like all the way from numbers to buying a ticket to like, woohoo, I won, and cashing it in and having that resource. Because that's the dream is, not needing anyone else's money at all, but, growing in my comfort of acceptance, that's a key, with like, oh, the secret and blah, 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 all that manifesting and whatnot. Accepting it, being open to receiving, that comes first. That's where I didn't necessarily practice what I preached. In this experience of losing my housing. Oh yeah, I didn't finish that little story, but they were shutting down my building. But when I signed up to go back to school at PSU, my residency was fucked up because I was living across the bridge in Washington. It's like 15 minutes, 20-minute drive or whatever. And then I was living in Portland, but they put my tuition in as out of state, so I didn't get the resident cheap program or the Washington border discount, which is 10% over in-state tuition. I got out of state tuition, which was like an extra 50 grand that I was not expecting. So I found out that I was losing my housing during the week, whatever, just before and into finals week. And I also found out that they work on quarters there, not semesters, which it was like, oh, that shit happens quick. Because I was like, I just got here. So, yeah. a lot of stuff in there. Questions, comments, love, like, meh, bothered by, troubled by, disagree with. Share it all. I'm open, and I will do my very best to answer questions, get into it. And if you want to work one-on-one with me, now's the time, because I'm just setting that up again. But yeah, like I said, you're going to be an early whatever audience, early adopter, early, client, whatever, when I have, lots to give. And, the only person asking for it right now is one client and my kid. So, and then, whatever. But that's where my end building for you guys. That's it. So that's all I got to say. Peace, love. I fucking love you. I love you. I hope you can feel it. I love you. I love you already. So let's fucking find that out. Let me know who you are. All right. Snarky Sifu signing out. Peace.